Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night, between the 26th and the 27th of June of 2026, both the Russians and the Ukrainians once again attacked each other using hundreds of drones. First, let's talk about the Russian attack. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that Russians used 129 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and as usually these days, the Russians were mainly attacking gas stations, parking sites, and many other different objects of logistics. First, let's talk about the siege of Zaporizhzhia. These days, the Russians bombed the siege of Zaporizhzhia significantly. Almost every single day we receive a report from this area, and as of the previous night we received the report that the Russians destroyed another gas station through the western parts of the settlement. And here we have videos on this match. In these videos we can see the consequences of attack, basically first minutes or hours after the Russians struck this object of fuel infrastructure. This gas station was destroyed, and as of the siege of Zaporizhzhia, just since the beginning of June, probably the Russians have destroyed dozens of gas stations through the territory of the city. And today we start receiving reports that the Ukrainians began suffering huge problems with fuel along the line of combat contact. As for the siege of Zaporizhzhia, the main task of Russians is to stop Ukraine's counteroffensive operation and to allow the Russians to advance further and to break through Ukraine's defense. And as of the previous night, we received changes both in Russian and Ukrainian favors. Let's discuss them in details, and first let's talk about the western Zaporizhzhia direction, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians improved their positions. As for Ukrainians, they improved their positions through the western Zaporizhzhia direction. Now we have no doubts that the Ukrainians captured or recaptured the settlement of Primorska completely, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 25th, this is the end of the 26th, and this is the beginning of the 27th of June of 2026. We have lots of videos published by different sources of how Russians were attacking Ukrainians, the Ukrainian soldiers that were moving through these villages. Lots of updates, and as we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians have deployed back units that used to be here before the Russians lost control over all these territories. And as you can see, the Russian Bobry squad has returned to this area. This is one of the most strongest FPV drone operators team. This team was responsible for the Robotina defense operation, if you remember, and now this unit was deployed in the area of the cities of Kamensk and Stepnogorsk, which means that the Russians will try to change the situation back in their favor. But as of now, we have changes, and the changes are in Ukrainian favor. From the other side, the Russians continue improving their positions in the direction of the western parts of the city of Orekhov, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 25th, this is the end of the 26th, and this is the beginning of the 27th of June of 2026. And we have a video how Ukrainians were attacking Russians through these three lines, but we believe that this is not a Russian position, but this is more like an infiltration group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation that managed to get these three lines and these fortifications. So from one side we see that Ukrainians continue counterattacks with the purpose to recapture the territories between the settlements of Stepnogorsk and Kamensk, but from the other side we see that the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Orekhov from the western and the southwestern directions. Another important area is the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation established complete control over the settlement of Novoskiliuvate. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As you can see, this is the second village that the Russians captured in the area of the city of Pokrovsk, and this is basically the first village on the Ukrainian side of the river by the name of Gaichul in the area of the settlement of Pokrovsk. As you can see, the village is located on the Ukraine side, and this is the video that was published by pro-Russian sources this morning. And here we can see how exactly the battle for the settlement has been taking place. As you can see, lots of drones as usually, lots of drones, lots of vehicles, lots of attacks, and during the final part of this video we can see at least two Russian soldiers that raised the Russian flag right exactly at this point. Most likely in coming hours after this video was published, published the Ukrainians will try to counterattack the settlement, but from the other side, we believe that if the Russians raised flags in the area of the settlement of Novoskiliuvate, this means that probably the line of combat contact goes much further in the northern and the western directions. So with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to counterattack and to publish a video with the Ukrainian flags through the village. So the Russians continue advancing in the Dnipropetrovsk direction, and we receive lots of changes. And as you can see, the Russians are trying to attack in the direction of the area where the Russians, since the beginning of April, have already destroyed dozens of gas stations, and where the Ukrainians obviously have some logistic and fuel problems and issues. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk direction, Slavyansk-Konstantinovka agglomeration. During the previous 12 hours, lots of videos were published on the Mets of how Russians were attacking logistics trains in this area. The Russians have destroyed logistics completely. In this video, we can see another locomotive that the Ukrainians were trying to hide below the bridge and somewhere along these railways. And as you can see, the Russians were using drones to attack these locomotives with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional reinforcements. And these attacks were taking place on the line between the settlements of Lazova and the Malinovka. Lots of locomotives were destroyed by Russians, which means that Ukrainians have huge problems with logistics during the major battle for the Donbas Arc operation. As for the area of the Donbas Arc operation, we haven't been receiving anything from this area probably since the beginning of this week. No changes were recorded, just artillery and just aviation strikes on Ukraine's positions. Today, pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians, as a result of airstrike, managed to destroy several more temporary deployment points of the armored forces carrying through this agglomeration. And today a very interesting article was published by Le Monde, and basically they confirmed everything that we've just discussed. According to this article, Ukrainian soldiers fear Russian glide bombs most, and as they cannot be intercepted. Moving further, the Russians right now are tasked to soften Ukraine's defense in the area of the former Slavyansk power station, and during the previous night we received another video from this area how Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement of Nikolaevka and along the river of Seversky Donetsk with the purpose to destroy Ukraine's logistics and not to allow the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces on major directions. As for the southern Kupiansk direction, during the previous night, additional changes were recorded both in Russian and Ukrainian favors. These are the changes on the ground between the days. Today we received a video published from the area of the settlement of Nova village of Nova, and here we could see how Russians were attacking vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. And another video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources from the area of the settlement of Shyikovka, and here we have videos of how Ukrainians were attacking Russians that managed to infiltrate these positions and basically to cut physically the roads between the villages of Shyikovka and Stepova. We haven't adjusted the map in Russian favor because we believe that those were just infiltration groups, but this is also a very important signal and warning bell that the Russians are able to move in this area. The Russians are able to attack Ukraine's logistics through these territories, which means that the situation is quite difficult for the armored forces of Ukraine. The northern Kupiansk direction, during the previous nights we received additional changes, more precisely additional reports published by pro-Russian sources, and according to these updates the Russians continue advancing through the northern parts of the Kupiansk region, and as a result of clashes additional strongholds and territories were captured by Russians. Now let's discuss the northern directions. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources once again reported that they answered the settlement of Zemляnoy Yar. This is already the outskirts of the settlement of Belyi Kolodiaz. And today pro-Russian sources reported that due to this critical situation, the Ukrainians have redeployed hundreds of soldiers of 57th Motor Rifle Brigade with the purpose to stabilize the situation. This is one of the strongest group of forces through the northeastern part of Kharkiv region, and they were deployed here with the purpose to stop Russians and not to allow the Russians to concentrate and consolidate their positions through the settlement of Zemlyanoy Yar. So the major battle for the northeastern part of Kharkiv region has begun. So that is why the Ukrainians during the previous night attacked the settlement of Shebekina, and this morning we received lots of videos on this matter. Here we have black smoke over the settlement of Shebekina. The Ukrainians most likely were attacking logistics of Russia with the purpose to slow down the Russian offensive in the direction of the settlement of Belyi Kolodiaz. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed another gas station through the city of Sumy. This time the Russians destroyed a gas station through the northwestern parts of the settlement, and these pictures were published, and here we can see the consequences of Russian attacks. Furthermore, the sources reported that these days the Ukrainians have deployed significant number of troops in the direction of the city of Sumy with the purpose to stabilize the situation. Military experts report that currently the biggest number of Ukrainian soldiers are recorded through the Sumy direction with the purpose not to allow the Russians to break through Ukraine's defense and to capture the city of Sumy, which means that the Sumy battle is brewing, and this is going to be one of the most important and powerful battles since the beginning of the special military operation. Meanwhile, the Russians destroyed another gas station to the south of the city of Sumy in the area of the settlement of Akhtirka. So as for different regions, now we see that the Sumy, the Chernigov, and the Zaporizhzhia regions have suffered most of all since the beginning of the special military operation on the matter of gas stations destroyed by Russians. And the Russians continue this process, and obviously when they finish with gas stations through these regions, the Russians will move further in the direction of Kharkiv, Dnipro regions, maybe even Kiev region as well. Now let's discuss the Ukrainian massive attack. Yesterday in the evening, the Ukrainians launched hundreds of drones deep inside of the territory of Russia, and the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning stated that during the overnight attack, the Russians destroyed around 200 of drones between 8 p.m. and 8 p.m. and 10 a.m. of the 27th of June of 2026, and as a result of this attack, the Ukrainians managed to deal some damage. We start receiving updates from the territory of the city of Liptse, and here we can see a Russian aircraft flying over the settlement trying to bring down Ukraine's drones that were launched by the armed forces of Ukraine. By the way, this morning pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the Ukrainians were launching the cruise missiles, the Flamingo cruise missiles deep inside of the territory of Russia. And according to different sources, as a result of this attack, the city of Volgograd on the territory of the Russian Federation was damaged and was attacked by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians during the night were trying to attack the Russia's military plant on the territory of the city, and as a result of attack, it seems that the military plant was hit and struck by the Ukrainians. Some facilities probably were damaged, and this morning we received lots of videos where we could see how exactly the Ukrainian missiles were flying in the direction of the city. So the city was damaged, but once again the damage wasn't significant in comparison, let's say, with the city of Moscow and with the cities like Novorossiysk and so on. And it seems that another night in a row, the Ukrainians haven't managed to get any results from their massive attacks. Once again, the Russians managed to repel the overnight attack, and the Russians repelled 200 of drones and dozens of missiles launched by the Ukrainians. And as we discussed during the previous videos, the main reason of this is that the Ukrainians were forced to move their launching site further in the central part of Ukraine, which means that the Russians managed to get additional time to recognize drones and missiles in the skies and to make proper decisions how to repel this or that attack. So this is the most important situation, and this situation the Russians managed to achieve because the Russians were bombing and attacking gas stations, parking sites along the line of combat contact deep inside of the territory of Ukraine for up to 150 or 200 kilometers. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.